We are currently consuming more resources than ever, exceeding the planet's capacity for generation. Their lifestyle is not disturbed, their mindset is not disturbed. We are able to create a sustainable growth process for the developing nations. The word Atmanirbhar that we coined altogether is not just about for a political reason. It is more about making your country self-reliant, and it's a need of the hour. Good morning and welcome to the first session in Chapter 2, Unit 4, second semester B.B.A, Sustainable Development, where we are going to speak about sustainable consumption and production. Now, in this unit, we are going to talk about a very interesting topic where we're going to talk about sustainable consumption. Why? Because this is all about doing more better with less. I want you to please focus on this word, doing more with less. Now, what happens in our time period is that we have been concentrating on making more and more, but we end up doing it lesser. Now, for example, we believe that we can build n number of houses, but the land resource is limited. So ultimately what happens? The consumption lands up to a shortage issue altogether. What we exactly want is that, can we build more homes, sustainable homes, with lesser occupancy of space? Now, what I might be speaking might be mythical to you, might be challenging, might be astounding to you, but in ground reality, that is the truth. It is all about decoupling the economic growth from environmental degradation, which is very, very important, increasing resource efficiency and promoting sustainable lifestyle. Yes, that is also coming up in a big way in our country. Why? Because this is what we are trying to speak. This is what we are trying to do here. This is very, very important as we are trying to speak about it, followed by the factor as we are trying to talk about in this factor. Whenever there is an increase in the resource efficiency, we are able to sustain with lesser amount of resources. So what we want is that let the utilization be less and the value added be greater. So that's why we want to see lesser utilization and higher returns altogether. Followed by, we are currently consuming more resources than ever, exceeding the planet's capacity for generation. In the meantime, the waste, pollution grows and the gap between the rich and poor is widening to a very great extent. Health, education, equity, empowerment, all these things are adversely affected. So let me just tell you here, this is a very, very important factor. Why? Because many a time what is happening here is that the gap between the inequality, that's what we are speaking about, is constantly on an increase. And because of that, what is happening here is that starting from education, from healthcare, from all kinds of resources that we are speaking about, there is definitely a gap that is being created. That gap has to be reduced. Everybody should be given an equal and a fair chance to live on this earth. So that's why we are talking about sustainable consumption and sustainable production altogether. Followed by, the sustainable consumption production refers to the use of services and related products which respond to the basic needs and bring better quality of life. Let me just underline this word for you, better quality of life. Why? Because everybody wants to have a similar kind of life. We don't want to have a comparison in our day-to-day living condition. We want to have the best kind of life. We want to minimize the use of natural resources, toxic materials, as well as the emissions of waste and pollutants over the life cycle cycle of a product or service so as that we don't jeopardize the needs of the future generation. So this is not needed for us in the future. What we are trying to see here is that we don't want to see our generations getting completely disturbed by the non-availability of resources, by the non-utilization factors altogether. So that's why we feel that this is mandatory for all of us, that we start building a better resource capability at any given point of time. So this is definitely needed for all of us to sit and think. Now, the other thing is that the decoupling of environment degradation that is happening from economic growth all factor. This is about doing more and better with the less increasing net welfare gains from the economic activities by reducing the use of the resource degradation and pollution of the whole life cycle. That's where we're going into the recycling factor. More is delivered in terms of goods and services with less in terms of the impact towards the resource use. Now, if you look into the construction field, many a times people have spoken about the green construction, the green ways of developing houses, or getting onto the environmental concern. Is this possible? If you try to ask me, the answer is yes. Why? Because if you start thinking about the recyclable materials, how to rebuild our own homes with the utilization of minimum resources that are needed for today, this is definitely possible. So what we are trying to see today is that we are trying to see a build, we are trying to see a quality, we are trying to see a system that can probably go ahead and create a strong impact in terms of growth, in terms of the activities altogether. So that's how we want the system to be developed. So this is what we are looking in terms of growth factor, in terms of the delivery aspect altogether. So we want to build a system that is fantastic in nature, that is creative in nature, and that can probably create a very good impact in terms of the living life condition. We don't want the impact to fall on the resource. We want the impact to have on the better quality of life. Followed by applying life cycle thinking. This is about increasing the sustainable management of resources, achieving resource efficiency along with both production consumption phases of the life cycle, including resource extraction, production of intermediate units, distribution, marketing, waste disposal, reuse of products and services. So the concept of recycling has somewhere set into our mindset. We believe in that, and we have been doing a great amount of activity in that, no doubts about it. We have always thought about it in a very, very creative manner. We have always believed that yes, we need to have a recycling system within us, and that recycling should go forward, should be able to think, should be able to put forward in terms of the activities that we have been speaking about, no doubts about it. But nevertheless, what we are exactly looking here, what we are exactly feeling in terms of our growth is that somewhere down the lane, we should not get distracted by technology and try to evade this earth by on a destruction pathway. What we want in a long run to see is that we want to combine the utilizations of all the best practices possible, try to create something better out of it, try to create something more meaningful so that the resource efficiency along with the production and consumption is being achieved. One side, when I'm talking about growth, the other side, I'm also talking about containment. Why? Because if production goes beyond the means of the human being thought process, then automatically we are risking our future generations' life. So we don't want to get into that situation where we make the future generation completely go blank. So we want a resource growth in a very, very concise manner. The next thing is sizing opportunities for developing nations, the leapfrogging concept that we have been talking about. The Sustainable consumption production contributes to the poverty eradication also, and that has been one of the millennium goals of the UN SDG, that's the sustainable development goals. Why? Because it's providing opportunities such as creation of markets, then we are talking about green and decent jobs, as well as more efficiency in terms of the welfare generation, natural resource management. All those factors are coming into picture for us, no doubts about it. Why? Because we have a thought about it in a very, very genuine manner. We have understood that concept very clearly, that this is how we are going to build it. This is how we are going to take it forward in terms of the growth aspect. What we exactly want today, what is that we are looking forward in terms of generation, in terms of growth aspect altogether, is that we want to see a resource generated that has been created. We want to see that the market is able to understand, observe all the factors of growth and efficiency and create a sustained environment. Now, in that sustained environment, we are trying to look for jobs. We are trying to look for better healthcare, better lifestyle, so that the people are not disturbed. Their lifestyle is not disturbed. Their mindset is not disturbed. We are able to create a sustainable growth process for the developing nations. We are not here for the development in terms of competition. We are here for the development in terms of a better lifestyle, a better factors of living. We are here for the future value of our generation. So we don't want to go back on a competitive mode, try to fight against each other, try to label countries by saying that you are still underdeveloped, you have not developed, you need a lot of space and time. What is that we are typically looking here is that in the coming millennium, we want development word to be understood very clearly. We want each and every activity that is focused, that is able to create a job, that is able to propel the economy, that is able to satisfy the basic needs of human. See, there are many countries in the world, going back to the African continent as an example, though we are speaking about technology, though we are speaking about growth in every nook and corner, but the other side, when you look at the countries of those underdeveloped like Ethiopia and Somalia, or probably Rwanda and other places, why is that the answer is still not available? That's probably why, because people have not understood the development as a whole factor, as together. What we have understood development is only in terms of wealth creation. What we have understood development is only in terms of capturing power, trying to dominate the world in terms of production, trying to dominate the world in terms of resource management. Now, that is not what is expected from the UN Sustainable Development Goals. What we want to see here is that we want everybody to get a job. We want the per capita income of every country to improve. We want everybody to have that decent life which is expected, which is a basic right of every citizen to live with. So that is why we want to see the economic system to have a better growth, a better prospect altogether. Followed by the procurement process, which is where we go public organizations to meet their needs for goods, services, works, utility in a way that achieves value for the money on the whole life cycle basis in terms of generating benefits, not only for the organization, but also for the society. Now, once upon a time in India, the story was such that the importance was given only to the public sector and not to the private sector. The private sector was largely ignored. Why? Because they were not competitive enough. They were not ready to give jobs. They were not opening up much. But post 1991, when we talk about the economic liberalization of our country, we are aware of the factor. We are very clearly aware of the factor that the government and the system has been moving hand to hand basis. They have been just going hand and on basis in terms of making the society more composite. Today, the private sector is being given a higher priority compared to the public sector. Even in our recent 75th year of the independence celebration, when we went through the news article that was spoken by our Honorable Prime Minister, It told very, very clearly that the push is more towards the private sector in terms of creating job, in terms of becoming a manufacturing hub, in terms of pushing up the production in a more sustained manner. The word Atmanirbhar that we coined altogether is not just about for a political reason. It is more about making your country self-reliant, and it's a need of the hour. Until and unless every country in the world decide to become self-reliant and they choose that path of becoming a better production house by themselves, they will not be able to sustain. The dependency of resources must be stopped as far as possible. India has to become an export house rather than an import house. India's problem today is that it does not work out in means of the talent factor. No, that's not the exact problem. We have enough talent with us. The problem is that we have not channelized the talent in terms of making it better, in terms of making it more target oriented. So that is where we feel that this is the time for all of us to significantly improve our country. The next thing is that when you see the public spending which has been going on an average of 12% of the GDP and up to 30% of the developing country, this shows the wielding power that we are having in terms of the goods and services that has been possible, thereby enabling the transition to a green economy as far as possible. That is quite important for all of us. That's what we have been talking about, and that's what we have been going through in terms of development, in terms of growth aspect altogether. Somewhere down the lane, when we speak about it, when we talk about it in different terms and terminologies altogether, this is mandatory for us because this is how we will be able to create a much more stronger economy, a much more sustained economy altogether, and this is mandatory. We have to transition from a just rupee-oriented economy to a green economy, and that would be the target, that would be the objective for us in the coming generation. Now, what is the sustainable procurement? As we are trying to say, we are also trying to talk about delivering the key policy and objectives, sending a strong market signal. Sustainable procurement allows the government to go reduce the greenhouse gas, improve the resource efficiency, support system, all those factors that we have been talking about. Definitely, yes, this has been a very great cycle that we have been talking about. It has been fantastic in terms of the growth aspects that we have been speaking about. Plus, we also want to talk about the factors saying that the greenhouse gas effects and all the negativity that has to be reduced when it comes to the sustainable development part. Followed by the positive social results that include poverty reduction, improved equity factors, yes, and we need to have better labor standards that's coming up. From an economic standpoint, we also need to generate income, reduce the cost, support the transfer of skills, technology, and promote by the domestic producers. This is mandatory for each one of us. So that's where we are becoming much more sustainable in nature. So this is a very, very important thing that we need to understand in the coming days. With this, I come to the end of the session. I hope and believe that all the input shared through this session would be of a great resource to you, both in terms of practical as well as on the theoretical walk of life. In the upcoming sessions, we will be talking about sustainable design, the city living, and how we need to create a better environment for ourselves. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.